Dr. Amanda Price stared at the message on her screen for the third time. The words were clear, but their meaning seemed impossible to believe. She was sitting in her small lab aboard the research ship Horizon's Edge, surrounded by data files about alien children who had found new homes with human families. The message had come from the Vorthak Confederation, one of the most powerful groups in the galaxy. Amanda had heard stories about the Vorthak since she was a child. They were massive creatures, standing over 9 feet tall with black scales that looked like armor. Their claws could cut through steel, and their golden eyes never showed mercy to enemies. "Your kind seeks cubs that are not yours," the message read. "This transgression ends now." Amanda felt her hands shake as she read those words again. She knew what they meant. For the past 5 years, human colonies had been taking in orphaned alien children from wars and disasters. These children had no families left, and humans had opened their homes to them. It seemed like the right thing to do. Captain Jake Morrison walked into her lab. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes. Amanda had worked with him for 3 years, and she trusted his judgment more than anyone else in the fleet. "Amanda, I got the same message you did," he said, sitting down across from her desk. "What do you think it means?" She turned her computer screen toward him. "I think it means trouble, Jake. Big trouble. The Vorthak had ruled their part of space for thousands of years. They were not just strong fighters, they were smart and organized. Their ships were faster than human ships, and their weapons were more powerful. Most importantly, they had never lost a war. Why do they care about human families? Jake asked. We are not bothering them. We are just helping children who have nowhere else to go. Amanda pulled up another file on her computer. It showed pictures of human families with their adopted alien children. There was the Johnson family from Mars Colony, who had adopted 3 small blue creatures called Aquari. After their planet was destroyed by a meteor, there was also the Martinez family from Europa Station, who were raising 2 young Corvin whose parents died in a mining accident. I think it goes against their beliefs, Amanda said. From what I have read, the Vorthak only believe in blood, families. Parents raise their own biological children, and that is it. They probably think we are doing something wrong by adopting children from other species. Jake frowned. That is crazy. These children would die without families to care for them. To us, it is crazy, Amanda agreed. To them, it might be the most important rule in the universe. The communication system in Amanda's lab made a beeping sound. Another message was coming in. This time, it was not just text. It was a video message from the Vorthak homeworld. The screen filled with the image of a massive Vorthak warrior. His black scales gleamed under harsh lights, and his golden eyes stared directly into the camera. When he spoke, his voice was deep and full of authority. I am War Chieftain Zexthari of the Vorthak Confederation, the creature said. Your species has committed crimes against the natural order of life. You steal cubs from their proper destinies. You corrupt bloodlines with your false compassion. Amanda felt cold as she listened to his words. There was no anger in his voice, which somehow made it worse. He spoke like he was stating simple facts. We have identified 3 human colonies that practice this abomination, Zexthari continued. New Eden Colony in the Tau Ceti system, Haven Station near the Centauri worlds, Paradise Valley on the Rim territories. These colonies have 7 days to return all stolen cubs to their proper fates. If they refuse, we will remove the corruption ourselves. The message ended, leaving Amanda and Jake sitting in silence. 7 days, Jake said quietly. That is not enough time to evacuate 3 colonies. Amanda was already working at her computer, sending urgent messages to the colonies Zexisthari had named. Jake, New Eden alone has over 12,000 adopted alien children. Some of them have been with human families for years. They do not even remember their birth species. What does he mean by proper fates? Jake asked. Amanda had studied alien cultures for most of her adult life. She knew the answer, but she did not want to say it out loud. For most predator species, orphaned children are left to survive on their own or die. They believe it makes the species stronger by removing the weak. Jake stood up quickly, his chair scraping against the metal floor. We cannot let that happen. Those children are part of human families now. They have brothers and sisters, parents who love them. The Vorthak do not understand love the way we do, Amanda said. To them, family is about genetics and strength. Our way of making families through choice and care probably seems insane to them. Over the next few hours, responses came back from the 3 colonies. The leaders of Haven Station were scared. They asked for help evacuating their people. Paradise. Valley was smaller and decided to give up the few alien children they had adopted rather than fight. But New Eden Colony sent a different message. Colony Administrator Ryan Clark appeared on their screen looking tired but determined. We received the Vorthak ultimatum, he said. I have talked to our people, and we have made our decision. These children are our children. We will not abandon them. If the Vorthak want to take our kids, they will have to go through us. Amanda felt proud and terrified at the same time. She knew what this meant. The Vorthak had never backed down from a threat, and humans had never faced an enemy this powerful. Jake, we need to contact Earth immediately, she said. The government needs to know what is happening. As Jake sent urgent messages back to Earth, Amanda looked at the pictures on her computer again. She saw human parents holding alien children, families of different species playing together, teenagers from various worlds studying side by side at colony schools. In 3 days, Vorthak ships appeared at the edge of all 3 colony systems. They were massive vessels that looked more like floating cities than spaceships. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy a planet. The siege had begun. Amanda realized that humanity was about to face its greatest test. It was not a fight for territory or resources. It was a fight for the simple idea that families could be made from love instead of just biology. She wondered if love would be enough to stand against the most powerful predators in the galaxy. Commander Lisa Bennett had never been so far from Earth. Her diplomatic ship, the Peacekeeper, was now orbiting the Vorthak homeworld of Krathus Prime. The planet looked like a giant red jewel spinning in space, with 3 moons casting shadows. Across its surface, Lisa was Earth's best diplomat, but she had never tried to negotiate with creatures like the Vorthak. She had spent weeks studying their culture, learning their language, and preparing for this meeting. Everything she had learned told her this would be the hardest conversation of her life. The Vorthak capital city stretched across an entire continent. From space, it looked like a maze of black metal towers reaching toward the sky. There were no parks or gardens visible anywhere. Everything was built for function and strength, not beauty. Lisa's ship was escorted down to the planet by 2 Vorthak fighters. The pilots never spoke to her, but she could feel them watching her ship carefully. When they landed at the diplomatic complex, Lisa saw Vorthak warriors for the first time in person. They were even more impressive than the videos had shown. Each warrior stood over 9 feet tall with scales that looked like black mirror. Their claws were retracted but still visible, and their golden eyes tracked every movement Lisa made. They moved with the fluid grace of natural hunters. A young Vorthak warrior led Lisa through the complex. The hallways were wide and tall, built for creatures much larger than humans. The walls were decorated with carvings that showed Vorthak. Warriors in battle, always winning against other species. The war chieftain will see you now, the warrior said in perfect English. His voice was deep and rumbling, like distant thunder. War chieftain Zexathari waited in a massive chamber with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows above. He sat on a throne made from the bones of some enormous creature. When Lisa entered, he stood to his full height, making her feel very small. "Human diplomat," he said, his golden eyes fixed on her face. "You have come to discuss the abomination your species practices." Lisa had prepared for this moment. She knew she had to show strength while also trying to find common ground. "War Chieftain Zexathari, I have come to understand why you object to our adoption practices. I hope we can find a solution that satisfies both our peoples." Zexathari walked down from his throne, his claws clicking on the stone floor. "There is no solution except the end of your corruption. You steal the essence of other bloodlines. You take cubs that belong to death or to their blood relatives." "These children have no blood relatives left," Lisa said. "Their families were killed in wars or disasters. Without adoption, they would die alone." "Death is the natural fate for orphaned cubs," Zexathari replied. "It has been this way for millions of years. The weak die and the strong survive. This makes all species stronger over time." Lisa felt sick at his words, but she kept her voice steady. "What about cubs who are not weak? What about children who could grow up to be strong and useful members of society if they had families to raise them?" Zexathari stopped walking and stared at her. "Strength comes from bloodlines. A cub raised by parents not of its blood will never reach its true potential. You humans corrupt these cubs by filling them with soft emotions and false bonds." Lisa had brought a tablet computer with her. She activated it and showed Zexathari pictures of human families with adopted alien children. "These children are healthy and happy. They are learning, growing, and contributing to their communities." The war chieftain looked at the pictures with disgust. "You show me proof of your crime. These cubs should have died with honor rather than live with corruption." "What about your own people?" Lisa asked. "Do Vorthak children never lose their parents?" "When Vorthak parents die, blood relatives claim the cubs. If no blood relatives exist, the cubs are taken to the wilderness trials. They survive alone for 1 full season. Those who live are strong enough to join adult society. Those who die were not worthy of life." Lisa tried to imagine human children being abandoned in a wilderness to survive or die. The idea was horrifying to her. "How many cubs survive these trials?" "Perhaps 1 in 10, Zexathari said with no emotion. "This ensures only the strongest bloodlines continue." "That means 9 out of 10 children die," Lisa said. "Children who might have grown up to be warriors, scientists, or leaders. Weak cubs who would have made the species weaker." Zexathari corrected. "You humans cannot understand this because you are soft. You value individual life over species strength." Lisa realized she was getting nowhere by arguing directly. She decided to try a different approach. War Chieftain. Your people are known throughout the galaxy as the greatest warriors. You have conquered many worlds and defeated many enemies. Zexathari's chest swelled with pride. This is true. The Vorthak are supreme among all species. How did you become so strong? Lisa asked. Through 10,000 generations of proper bloodline selection. Through trials that test strength and courage. Through the wisdom of our ancestors who knew that only the strong should breed. Lisa nodded thoughtfully. And yet, my species has never been conquered by yours. The War Chieftain's eyes flashed with anger. We have not chosen to conquer you. You are not worth the effort. Or perhaps, Lisa said carefully, we have found a different path to strength. Perhaps caring for orphaned children, even those not of our blood, makes us stronger in ways you have not considered. Zexathari laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Impossible. Compassion is weakness. Love for creatures not of your blood is corruption. You will learn this when our ships arrive at your colonies. Lisa spent 3 more days on Crethus Prime, meeting with other Vorthak leaders. Every conversation ended the same way. The Vorthak could not understand how humans could love children who were not biologically related to them. To them, it was not just wrong, it was unnatural and disgusting. On her last day, a younger Vorthak warrior named Sub-Commander Kraketh approached her privately. He was smaller than the others, only about 8 feet tall with darker scales. Human diplomat, he said quietly. I have a question that I cannot ask my superiors. Lisa was surprised. No Vorthak had spoken to her informally before. What is your question? If a human parent will fight to protect an adopted cub, does this not show strength? If they will sacrifice for a child not of their blood, does this not show courage? Lisa felt a spark of hope. Yes, it does. It shows a different kind of strength than your people value, but it is real strength. Kraketh looked around to make sure no one was listening. I have watched the videos of human families. The parents seem to love their adopted cubs as much as their biological ones. This confuses me. Love is not limited by genetics, Lisa explained. A human can choose to love any child and fight for them as fiercely as they would fight for their own biological children. But why would they choose this? Kraketh asked. What benefit does it bring them? Lisa thought about how to explain something so basic to human nature. It brings joy, purpose, and meaning. It makes the parents feel fulfilled and the children feel safe and valued. Kraketh was quiet for a long moment. I do not understand these emotions, but I have seen that humans fight very hard for their colonies. Perhaps there is strength in your way that we do not recognize. As Lisa prepared to leave Crethus Prime, she realized that her mission had failed. The Vorthak would not change their minds through diplomacy, but her conversation with Kraketh gave her a small hope that not all Vorthak were completely closed to new ideas. On the flight back to human space, Lisa recorded her final report. The Vorthak view our adoption practices as a fundamental violation of natural law. They believe we are weakening both our species and the adopted children by forming families through choice rather than genetics. Military conflict appears inevitable. She paused her recording and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human families were waiting to see if they would be allowed to keep their children. Lisa hoped they were ready for a fight because diplomacy had failed completely. Ryan Clark stood on the observation deck of New Eden Colony's central tower, watching the Vorthak ships position themselves around his world. The massive vessels looked like dark metal clouds against the stars. Each ship was larger than the entire human fleet, and there were 12 of them forming a perfect circle around the planet. Ryan had been the colony administrator for 8 years. He had helped build New Eden from a small mining outpost into a thriving world with over 50,000 people. He had seen the colony grow, watched families arrive and make new homes, and celebrated as children were born under New Eden's twin suns. Now he faced the hardest decision of his life. "Sir, we have another message from the Vorthak flagship," said Carol Martinez, his communications officer. She was a young woman with worried eyes who had been working around the clock since the crisis began. "Put it on the main screen," Ryan said. The image that appeared showed War Chieftain Zexathari standing on what looked like the bridge of his ship. Behind him, Ryan could see other Vorthak warriors working at control stations. Everything about their ship looked designed for war. "Administrator Clark of New Eden Colony," Zexathari said in his deep, rumbling voice, "you have had 5 days to consider our ultimatum. What is your decision?" Ryan stepped forward, making sure his voice was clear and strong. "War Chieftain, I have spoken with the people of our colony. We will not surrender our children to die in your wilderness trials. They are part of our families now." Zexathari's golden eyes seemed to glow brighter. "Then you choose the destruction of your entire colony for the sake of cubs that are not yours by blood." "They are ours by choice," Ryan replied, "and choice is just as strong as blood." The Vorthak leader made a sound that might have been laughter. "You will learn otherwise. We are activating a complete blockade of your world. No ships in or out, no supply deliveries. When your people begin to starve, you will reconsider." The communication ended, leaving Ryan staring at the black screen. Around the colony's command center, his staff worked quietly, but he could feel their fear. They all knew what a Vorthak blockade meant. Ryan walked through the colony's residential areas that evening. New Eden was built into the side of a mountain range, with houses and buildings carved into the rock face. Gardens and parks filled every available space, making the colony feel alive and green despite being on a harsh frontier world. In Harrison Park, he found the Rodriguez family having dinner at one of the outdoor tables. Amy Rodriguez was 8 years old with brown hair and bright eyes. Sitting next to her was her adopted brother, a young Corvin named Skex, who looked like a small humanoid covered in gray fur with large ears and curious eyes. Amy and Skex had been found together as babies in the wreckage of a transport ship that had been attacked by pirates. They had been raised together by Maria and Carlos Rodriguez, and they acted like any other brother and sister. Amy helped Skex with his homework, and Skex shared his favorite snacks with Amy. "Mr. Clark," Maria Rodriguez called when she saw him. "Is it true that the Vorthak want us to send Skex away?" Ryan sat down at their table, trying to find the right words. "They do not understand our families, Mrs. Rodriguez. They think parents can only love their biological children." "But Skex is our son," Carlos said firmly. "He has been with us for 7 years. He does not even remember being anything but human." Skex looked up from his dinner with worried eyes. "Am I going to have to leave?" he asked in a small voice. Amy grabbed her brother's furry hand. "No way. You are staying with us, right, Mr. Clark?" Ryan felt his heart break a little. "We are going to do everything we can to keep all our families together," he promised. As Ryan continued his walk through the colony, he saw the same scene repeated dozens of times. Human families with adopted alien children, all facing the same fear. There was the Kim family with their 3 adopted Aquari children, small blue beings who breathed through gills and needed special humid environments. The Aquari children had been orphaned when their water world was poisoned by industrial accidents. He saw the Thompson family with their adopted Zentari twins, crystalline beings who communicated partially through color changes in their translucent skin. The twins had been abandoned as infants because they were born with a rare condition that made them unable to change colors properly. In Zentari society, this made them outcasts, but the Thompsons loved them exactly as they were. Ryan stopped at the colony school where evening classes were being held. Through the windows, he could see human and alien children working together on projects. A teenage Corvin girl was helping a young human boy with his math homework. 2 Aquari children were showing their human classmates how to build underwater breathing devices. This was what the Vorthak wanted to destroy. Not just the individual families, but the entire idea that different species could live and learn together as equals. 3 days into the blockade, the first supply shortages began. New Eden produced most of its own food, but they depended on shipments from other worlds for medical supplies and technology parts. The colony's hospitals started running low on medicines that several of the alien children needed to stay healthy. Dr. Patricia Williams, the colony's chief medical officer, came to Ryan's office with a grim report. "We have enough medicine for the Aquari children to last maybe 2 more weeks," she said. "After that, they will start getting sick. Without their breathing supplements, they could die." "What about the Zentari twins?" Ryan asked. "They need special minerals in their diet that we cannot produce here. We have enough for about 10 days. Ryan looked out his office window at the Vorthak ships hanging in space like giant metal vultures. "The Vorthak are counting on this. They think we will give up the children to save them from a slow death." Dr. Williams sat down heavily in a chair. "Ryan, I have to ask the hard question. If it comes down to choosing between watching these children die slowly or surrendering them to the Vorthak trials where they might have a chance." "No," Ryan said firmly. "We do not abandon our families. There has to be another way." That night, Ryan called a colony-wide meeting in the main auditorium. Over 40,000 people attended, filling every seat and standing in the aisles. Human and alien families sat together, some holding hands, others with children sleeping in their parents' arms. "Friends," Ryan began, "we all know why we are here. The Vorthak have given us a choice: surrender our adopted children or watch our colony slowly die under their blockade." A man in the crowd stood up. "What if we tried to evacuate? Get the kids out somehow?" "Their ships would stop any vessel trying to leave," Ryan replied. "They are not going to let us find a middle solution." A woman with 2 Aquari daughters raised her hand. "Mr. Clark, my girls do not even know they are not human. They call me Mama, and they have never lived anywhere but here. How can we explain to them that some people think they should die because they were not born from my body?" Ryan felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. Every face in the crowd was looking to him for answers he did not have. "I cannot make this choice for anyone," he said finally. "Each family has to decide for themselves. But I want you to know that, whatever you choose, this colony will support you." An old man in the back of the auditorium stood up slowly. Ryan recognized him as Frank Miller, one of the colony's original founders. "I have a question for everyone here," Frank said in a strong voice. What makes a family? Love, someone called out. Caring for each other, said another voice. Being there when things get hard, added a third. Frank nodded. That is right. And how many of our families here would be willing to die for their children, even their adopted ones? Hands shot up all over the auditorium, human parents and their alien children, all showing they belong together. Then we have our answer, Frank said. We stay together. We do not give up our kids to bullies no matter how big their ships are. The crowd erupted in applause. Ryan felt tears in his eyes as he watched families holding each other tighter, making their choice together. As people filed out of the auditorium, Amy Rodriguez walked up to the stage with Skex beside her. Mr. Clark, she said, my mom and dad said I could tell you something. What is it, Amy? She stood up straighter, looking very serious for an 8-year-old. We are not scared of the Vorthak. Skex is my brother, and I am going to protect him no matter what. Looking down at the determined little girl and her adopted Corvin brother, Ryan realized something important. The Vorthak thought they were fighting against weakness and corruption, but they were actually fighting against the strongest force in the universe, the love of a parent for their child, no matter where that child came from. Senator Kate Williams walked through the grand halls of the Galactic Council building on Nexus Prime. The building was designed to impress, with ceilings that stretched up for hundreds of feet and walls made from crystal that sparkled in the light of the system's 3 suns. Representatives from over 200 species worked here, trying to keep peace between the stars. Today, Kate felt very small in this massive place. She was here to speak for humanity, to try to save the families on New Eden and the other besieged colonies. But she knew the odds were against her. The council chamber was a huge circular room with seats arranged in tiers around a central speaking platform. Each species had their own section, designed to accommodate their specific needs. The Aquari sat in water-filled tanks, while the crystalline Zentari rested on specially designed heat platforms. Kate took her place at the human delegations table and looked around the room. Many of the other delegates were already talking in small groups, and she could tell from their body language that most of them supported the Vorthak position. The Thrakari delegation sat in the section reserved for predator species. They were tall, thin creatures with 4 arms and faces that looked like bird skulls. Kate had read that they practiced ritual combat to decide which parents could keep their offspring. Only the strongest Thrakari were allowed to breed. Near them sat the Draconi Empire representatives. The Draconi looked like humanoid dragons with scales and small wings. Their society was built around the idea that genetic purity made their species superior to all others. They had been allies of the Vorthak for over 1,000 years. Council Speaker Jorvak, a dignified member of the ancient Altarian species, called the session to order. His species had been mediating galactic disputes for millions of years, and his face showed the wisdom of someone who had seen countless civilizations rise and fall. We are here to address the current conflict between the Vorthak Confederation and the human colonies, Speaker Jorvak announced. The Vorthak claim that human adoption practices violate natural law. The humans claim the right to form families through choice rather than biology. War Chieftain Zexathari rose from the Vorthak section. Even sitting down, he towered over most other delegates. When he stood to his full height, he dominated the entire chamber. Honored Council, he began, his voice carrying easily through the vast room. The humans commit the gravest sin possible against the order of life, They steal cubs from their proper destinies and corrupt them with false bonds. He gestured toward a holographic display that showed images of human families with adopted alien children. Look at this abomination. Human adults teaching Corvin, cubs to behave like humans. Aquari younglings raised to breathe air instead of accepting their water-dwelling nature. Zentari crystals dimmed by exposure to human softness. Murmurs of agreement came from many sections of the chamber. Kate felt her heart sink as she realized how many species supported the Vorthak view. These cubs should have died with honor, Zexathari continued, or been claimed by blood relatives of their own species. Instead, they are corrupted by creatures who do not understand their true nature. When it was Kate's turn to speak, she walked to the central platform, feeling the weight of thousands of eyes upon her. She had prepared for this moment for weeks, but standing here, she felt the enormous responsibility of speaking for every human family facing this crisis. "Honored delegates," she began, "I want to tell you about a little girl named Amy Rodriguez. She is 8 years old and lives on New Eden Colony. 7 years ago, she and her adopted brother Skex were found as babies in the wreckage of a destroyed transport ship." Kate activated her own holographic display, showing images of Amy and Skex growing up together. Amy has spent her entire childhood protecting and caring for Skex. She helps him with his homework, shares her toys with him, and comforts him when he has nightmares. Skex does the same for Amy. The images showed the two children playing together, studying together, and supporting each other through the normal challenges of growing up. The Vorthaks say that Amy cannot truly love Skex because they do not share blood. But I ask you to look at these images and tell me that what you see is not real love. Kate changed the display to show other families from the human colonies. Here is Dr. Patricia Kim with her 3 adopted Aquari daughters. She learned to create underwater environments in her home so they could be comfortable. She studied Aquari, medicine so she could treat their illnesses. She has dedicated her life to giving these children the best possible future. More images appeared showing human parents adapting their homes, learning alien languages, and studying other species, cultures to better care for their adopted children. "We do not corrupt these children," Kate said firmly. "We give them love, education, and opportunity. Many of them have grown up to become doctors, engineers, artists, and leaders in their communities." When Kate finished speaking, Draconi Warmaster, Kithara stood to respond. Her scales were deep red with black markings, and her wings rustled with agitation. "The human speaks of love as if it excuses their crime," Kithara said, her voice hissing slightly. "But love without proper bloodlines is meaningless. These cubs will never reach their true potential because they are not raised by parents who understand their genetic heritage." "What potential do dead children have?" Kate asked. "Because that is what the Vorthak alternative offers. Death for any child unlucky enough to lose their birth parents." Thrakari General Kexamoth clicked his 4 arms together in a gesture Kate recognized as contempt. "Death is preferable to corruption. A cub that dies with its bloodline intact is superior to one that lives in genetic confusion." Kate felt anger rising in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. "You speak about genetic confusion, but what about practical results? Our adopted children are healthy, educated, and productive members of society. How is this worse than death?" "Because," Zexthari interjected, "it weakens the entire galaxy. When cubs are raised by the wrong species, they do not learn their true nature. They do not develop their natural instincts. They become weak imitations of what they should have been." The debate continued for hours. Kate presented evidence of successful interspecies adoption, showing test scores, health records, and achievement data for adopted alien children in human families. But every piece of evidence was dismissed by the Predator Coalition. When the council broke for recess, Kate met with the few delegates who had expressed support for the human position. There were only 12 species out of over 200 that backed humanity's right to adopt across species lines. "I am sorry, Senator Williams," said Ambassador Quellax of the Peaceful Harmony Collective. "My people support your cause, but we are not warriors. We cannot help you fight the Vorthak." "What we need is not military support," Kate replied. "We need to change minds. We need to show them that our way works." Ambassador Tavara of the Scientific Union, a tall being with tentacles instead of arms, gestured sadly. "The predator species will not be convinced by data or logic. They believe in strength and genetic purity above all else. Your compassion is seen as weakness." As the day wore on, more bad news reached Kate from the human colonies. Paradise Valley had finally surrendered their adopted children rather than face total destruction. The Vorthak had taken 37 alien children from human families and transported them to appropriate facilities for species-correct upbringing. Haven Station was running critically low on medical supplies. 3 adopted Zentari children had already become sick without their required mineral supplements. On New Eden, the situation was getting desperate. Food rationing had begun, and the colony's power systems were starting to fail without replacement parts. When the council reconvened for the final vote, Kate knew what the result would be before Speaker Jorvac announced it. The Galactic Council finds that the Vorthak Confederation's concerns about interspecies adoption are valid, Jorvac said solemnly. "By a vote of 167 to 31, we recommend that all species discontinue the practice of adopting children from other biological lineages." Kate felt the weight of defeat crushing down on her. She had failed not just as a diplomat, but as a protector of families who were counting on her. As delegates began filing out of the chamber, Subcommander Kraketh of the Vorthak delegation approached her. Kate was surprised. No Vorthak had spoken to her directly since the crisis began. "Senator Williams," he said quietly, "I have been watching the images you showed of human families." "And?" Kate asked, too exhausted to be diplomatic. "I do not understand why human parents would fight so hard for cubs not of their blood," Kraketh said. "But I have seen that they do fight. This confuses me." Kate looked into his golden eyes and saw something she had not expected. Doubt. "They fight because love is not limited by genetics," she said. "A parent's love for their child is the strongest force in the universe, whether that child shares their DNA or not." Kraketh was quiet for a moment. "If this is true, then human parents should be very dangerous enemies." "Only if you threaten their children," Kate replied. As she walked out of the council building, Kate realized that the diplomatic battle was over. But the real war for the future of interspecies families was just beginning. The Vorthak had won in the political arena. Dr. Marcus Johnson sat in the underground meeting room beneath New Eden Colony's central administrative building. The room had been designed as an emergency shelter with thick walls that could protect against orbital bombardment. Now it served as the secret headquarters for the colony's resistance planning. Marcus was a child psychologist who had worked with adopted alien children for over 10 years. He understood better than most people how strong the bonds between human parents and their adopted children could be. He also understood the Vorthak mind better than he wanted to. Around the table sat the colony's leadership team, Ryan Clark looked exhausted after weeks of managing the crisis. Dr. Patricia Williams had dark circles under her eyes from working around the clock to keep the colony's alien children healthy with dwindling medical supplies. Commander Alex Barnes, the colony's security chief, sat studying tactical reports that showed the impossible odds they faced. "We need to face facts," Commander Barnes said grimly. "The Vorthak have 12 warships in orbit. We have 6 defensive platforms and maybe 30 small fighter craft. If they decide to attack directly, we will last about 20 minutes. "They will not attack directly," Marcus said. "That would make them look like bullies picking on a weak opponent. The Vorthak care too much about their honor for that." Ryan leaned forward. "Then what do they plan to do? The blockade is slowly killing us. Our food stores will last maybe another month. Medical supplies are almost gone." Marcus had been studying Vorthak culture for weeks, looking for any weakness or opportunity. "They want us to surrender the children, voluntarily. They want to prove that human love is weaker than Vorthak strength. If they just take the children by force, they do not prove their point." "So what are you suggesting?" Dr. Williams asked. Marcus took a deep breath. What he was about to propose sounded crazy even to him. "We challenge them to prove their philosophy through combat trials." The room fell silent. Everyone stared at Marcus as if he had lost his mind. "You want us to fight the Vorthak?" Commander Barnes asked. "Marcus, one Vorthak warrior could probably defeat 10 human soldiers." "Not soldiers," Marcus said. "Parents. We challenge them to single combat trials, but with a twist. Instead of biological parents defending their children, we have adopted parents face the trials." Ryan shook his head. "I do not understand. How does that help us?" Marcus stood up and began pacing around the small room. The Vorthak believe that biological bonds create stronger motivation than chosen bonds. They think a birth parent will fight harder for their child than an adoptive parent will. "They are probably right," Dr. Williams said quietly. "Are they?" Marcus asked. "Think about it. A biological parent loves their child partly because of instinct, because of genetic programming. But an adoptive parent chooses to love their child despite having no genetic reason to do so. Which love is stronger? Or the one that comes naturally or the one that comes from conscious choice?" Commander Barnes frowned. "Even if you are right about motivation, it does not matter if our people get killed in the first 30 seconds of combat." "But that is the beauty of it," Marcus said excitedly. "The Vorthak Honor Code requires fair combat. If we challenge them properly, they have to give our champions a real chance to win. They cannot just use their claws to cut down unarmed humans." Ryan was beginning to understand. "You think we can use their own culture against them?" "Exactly. The Vorthak respect strength above all else. If human adoptive parents can prove their strength through combat, the Vorthak will have to acknowledge that our bonds are legitimate." Dr. Williams looked skeptical. "And if our champions lose?" "Then we are no worse off than we are now," Marcus replied. "But if they win, we might change the way the entire galaxy thinks about family." The debate continued for hours. They discussed the risks, the logistics, and the chances of success. Finally, Ryan called for a decision. "We need volunteers," he said. "Parents who are willing to risk their lives in combat trials for their adopted children." "I will go first," said a voice from the corner of the room. Everyone turned to look at Captain Troy Adams. He was a former military officer who had come to New Eden 5 years ago to start a farm. He was a big man with graying hair and hands. that showed the calluses of hard work. "Troy, you do not have to do this," Ryan said. "Yes, I do," Troy replied firmly. "My daughter Zixia needs me to do this." Zixia was a 12-year-old Thrillaxian girl that Troy had adopted 3 years ago. Thrillaxians were one of the galaxy's most feared warrior species, with crystalline exoskeletons that could deflect most weapons. Zixia had been orphaned when her birth parents died in a mining accident, and Troy had taken her in despite having no experience with alien children. "The Thrillaxians are supposed to be natural fighters," Troy continued. "If I can prove that a human can fight just as hard for a Thrillaxian child as a Thrillaxian parent would, it might open some eyes." Over the next week, Marcus worked with Troy to understand Vorthak combat customs. The trials would be fought with traditional weapons, blades, clubs, and shields, no energy weapons or modern technology. The combat would continue until one fighter yielded or was unable to continue. Marcus also spent time with Zixia, helping her understand what her adoptive father was planning to do. She was a quiet girl with silver-blue crystalline skin that sparkled in the light. Like most Thrillaxians, she had been taught that strength was the most important virtue. "Papa Troy does not look like a warrior," Zixia said, using the name she had called him since she was small. "He is a different kind of warrior," Marcus explained. "He fights not because he is programmed to, but because he chooses to. He fights for you because he loves you, not because genetics tell him to." "Will he win?" Zixia asked. Marcus wished he could promise her that everything would be all right. "I do not know, but I know he will fight harder than anyone has ever fought before, because you are worth fighting for." The challenge was sent to War Chieftain Zexathari, using the proper Vorthak ceremonial language. Marcus had spent days learning the exact phrases. Required to issue a formal combat challenge that the Vorthak could not refuse without losing honor. "I, Captain Troy Adams of New Eden Colony, challenge the Vorthak Confederation to trial by combat," the message read. "I claim the right to defend my chosen daughter Zixia through strength of arms. If I prove victorious, you must acknowledge that the bond between us is legitimate and strong." The response came back within hours. Zexathari himself appeared on the communication screen, his golden eyes showing what might have been amusement. "Human farmer," he said, "you wish to face a Vorthak champion in combat for the sake of a cub not of your blood?" "I do," Troy replied, standing straight and speaking clearly. "Zixia is my daughter in every way that matters. I will prove this through combat if necessary." Zexathari studied Troy for a long moment. "Very well. You will face Champion Velthara aboard our ship. Combat will be broadcast throughout the galaxy, so all may witness either your courage or your folly." When the transmission ended, Troy sat down heavily. He had just committed himself to fighting one of the galaxy's most dangerous warriors with nothing but medieval weapons and the love he felt for his adopted daughter. "Are you scared?" Zixia asked him that evening as they sat together on the porch of their farm. Troy looked out at the fields he had planted and the home he had built. "Yes, sweetheart, I am terrified." "Then why are you doing it?" Troy put his arm around his daughter, feeling the cool smoothness of her crystalline skin. "Because you are my little girl, and parents protect their children, no matter what." "Even if they might die?" Zixia asked in a small voice. "Especially then." Troy said, "That is what love means, Zixia. It means that someone else's happiness is more important than your own safety." As they watched New Eden's twin suns set behind the mountains, Troy realized that he had already won the most important victory. He had a daughter who loved him and trusted him, even though they shared no genetic material. If that was not strength, he did not know what was. Tomorrow, he would have to prove to the galaxy that chosen love could be just as powerful as biological instinct. Tonight, he just held his daughter and tried to memorize the feeling of her small hand in his. The fate of thousands of interspecies families across the galaxy would depend on what happened in that combat arena. But right now, Troy Adams was simply a father spending time with his child, and that was enough. The combat arena aboard the Vorthak flagship Eternal Fang was a massive circular space with walls that rose up into darkness. The floor was covered with sand that had been stained red by thousands of years of ritual combat. Weapons racks lined the walls holding swords, axes, spears, and shields made from alien metals. Captain Troy Adams stood in the center of the arena, trying to control his breathing. He wore simple leather armor that felt strange and heavy after years of farming clothes. In his hands, he held a metal sword and shield that felt too light compared to the work tools he was used to. Across the arena from him stood Champion Velthara, a female Vorthak warrior who moved like liquid death. She was smaller than most Vorthak males, but still towered over Troy at 8 feet tall. Her black scales seemed to absorb the arena's lights, and her golden eyes tracked every movement Troy made. Above them, in a viewing gallery that circled the arena, hundreds of Vorthak warriors watched in silence. War Chieftain Zexathari sat in the center of the gallery, his massive form filling a throne made from polished bone. The combat was being broadcast live throughout the galaxy, on thousands of worlds. Beings of every species watched to see if a human farmer could prove that chosen love was as strong as biological instinct. On New Eden Colony, Zixia sat with Dr. Marcus Johnson and other colony leaders, watching the transmission on a large screen. Her crystalline skin had turned a pale blue color that Marcus recognized as the Thralaxian expression of fear. "Remember what we talked about," Marcus said quietly to her. "Your father is not fighting just with his muscles. He is fighting with his heart." In the arena, a Vorthak official announced the terms of combat. "This trial will continue until one combatant yields or is unable to continue. The human Troy Adams claims that his bond with the Thralaxian cub Zixia is equivalent to a blood bond. Champion Velthara will test this claim." Velthara raised her weapons, 2 curved blades that looked like extensions of her own claws. "Human," she said in a voice like grinding stone, "I have killed more enemies than you have seen sunrises. Surrender now, and your death will be quick." Troy lifted his shield and pointed his sword toward her. "I did not come here to surrender. I came here to prove that my daughter means everything to me." The official gave the signal to begin, and Velthara moved faster than Troy had thought possible. Her first strike came down like lightning, and only his shield saved him from losing his head. The impact drove him to one knee, his arm numb from the force of the blow. The crowd of Vorthak warriors made sounds of approval. They expected this to be over quickly, but Troy rolled sideways, avoiding Velthara's second strike, and managed to get back to his feet. He had spent 3 weeks training with Commander Barnes, learning basic sword work and trying to prepare for this moment. He knew he could not match a Vorthak's speed or strength, but he had learned something else during those training sessions. He had learned that he would do absolutely anything to protect Zixia. Velthara attacked again, her twin, blades moving in a deadly dance. Troy blocked what he could and dodged what he could not block. One blade sliced across his shoulder, opening a line of blood through his leather armor. Another strike grazed his leg, making him stumble. "You fight well for prey," Velthera said, circling him like a predator. "But courage alone will not save you." "I am not fighting with courage alone," Troy gasped, trying to catch his breath. "I am fighting with love." Velthara laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Love is weakness. It clouds judgment and makes warriors soft." Troy thought about the first time he had met Zixia. She had been brought to the colony as a traumatized 9-year-old who spoke no human languages and flinched away from any physical contact. The other potential families had been intimidated by her crystalline appearance and her reputation as a member of a warrior species. But Troy had seen something else. He had seen a scared little girl who needed someone to care about her. "You are wrong," Troy said, raising his sword again. "Love does not make you weak. It makes you stronger than you ever thought possible." He attacked this time, not with any hope of overwhelming Velthera's defenses, but to show that he was not giving up. His sword rang against her blades as she easily parried his strikes. But something was different now. Troy was not fighting like someone who expected to lose. He was fighting like someone who had something worth dying for. Velthara's next attack opened a deep cut across Troy's chest. Blood soaked through his armor, and he staggered backward. The Vorthak crowd began making sounds that Marcus recognized as anticipation. They thought the end was near, but Troy did not fall. Instead, he started talking, his voice carrying across the arena even as he fought for his life. 3 years ago, Zixia had nightmares every night, he said, blocking another strike. She would wake up screaming because she dreamed that her birth parents were dying again. Velthara pressed her attack, but Troy continued speaking between sword strokes. "I would sit by her bed until she fell asleep again. Sometimes that took hours. I did not mind, because that is what fathers do." Another blade cut across his arm, but Troy kept fighting and talking. "Last year she got sick with Thrylaxian molt fever. The doctors said there was nothing they could do except wait and hope. I stayed with her for 6 days straight, keeping her cool when her crystalline skin overheated and warming her when she got too cold." Velthara's attacks were becoming more vicious, but Troy's voice never wavered. 2 months ago, she brought home her first perfect test score from school. She was so proud, and so was I. We celebrated by making her favorite dinner together. She taught me how to cook Thrylaxian food, and I taught her how to make human desserts. The arena had become strangely quiet. Even the Vorthak crowd was listening to Troy's words as he fought. Every morning she hugs me before school and tells me she loves me. Every night, I tuck her into bed and tell her the same thing. She is not my biological daughter, but she is my daughter in every way that matters. Velthara's next strike should have finished him. Her blade came down toward his neck with killing force. But something had changed in Troy's fighting. He was no longer just defending himself. He was fighting with the desperate strength of a parent protecting their child. His shield caught her blade, and for the first time in the combat, he managed to land a strike of his own. His sword cut across her thigh, drawing blue Vorthak blood. The crowd gasped. No human had ever wounded a Vorthak champion in ritual combat. Velthara looked down at her wound with surprise, then back at Troy with new respect. "You fight better now, human. What has changed?" Troy was breathing heavily, blood running down his face from a cut above his eye. "I stopped fighting for myself. Now I am fighting for her." On New Eden, Zixia was watching the screen with tears running down her crystalline cheeks. "Papa Troy," she whispered. Please do not die for me." But Marcus understood what was happening. Troy was not fighting to win anymore. He was fighting to show the galaxy what a parent's love looked like. Every wound he took, every time he got back up, every word he spoke about his daughter. It was all proof that chosen bonds could be just as strong as biological ones. The combat continued for another 20 minutes. Troy was covered in blood and barely standing, but he refused to yield. He spoke about every memory he had of Zixia, every moment that had made them father and daughter. Finally, Velthara stepped back and lowered her weapons. The arena fell completely. "Silent! I yield!" she announced. The crowd of Vorthak warriors erupted in confusion. Champions did not yield to inferior opponents. "You have proven your point, human," Velthara said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I have fought many warriors in this arena. I have faced enemies who fought for honor, for territory, for revenge. But I have never faced anyone who fought with the strength you have shown today." She looked up at War Chieftain Zexthari in the viewing gallery. "This human's love for his adopted cub burns brighter than any bloodline I have ever seen. If this is what chosen bonds can create, then perhaps we have been wrong to dismiss them." Troy collapsed to his knees, his sword falling from nerveless fingers. But he was smiling through the blood and pain. He had done it. He had proven that a human could love an adopted alien child just as fiercely as any biological parent. The galaxy had witnessed that love, and it had been found worthy. On the viewing screen, Zixia was crying and laughing at the same time. "That is my Papa Troy," she told everyone around her. "He did that for me." And across the galaxy, millions of beings watched and wondered if maybe the humans had discovered something important about the true nature of family. War Chieftain Zexthari stood alone in his private chambers, aboard the flagship Eternal Fang, staring out at the stars through a massive viewport. For the first time in his long life, he felt uncertain about beliefs that had guided the Vorthak for thousands of generations. 3 days had passed since the human Troy Adams had fought champion Velthara in the arena. The combat had been broadcast across the galaxy, and the response had been unlike anything Zexthari had expected. Instead of mocking the human's weakness, many species were talking about his strength. Instead of dismissing his love for an adopted child, they were calling it inspiring. A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry to his chambers. "Enter," Zexthari commanded. Sub-Commander Kraketh walked in, moving with the careful grace all Vorthak learned from childhood. But Zexthari noticed something different about his second-in-command's posture. There was hesitation in his movements, uncertainty in his golden eyes. "War Chieftain," Kraketh said, "I have been reviewing the communications we have received since the combat trial." "And?" Zexthari asked, though he suspected what Kraketh was going to say. "Over 60 species have sent messages expressing support for the human position. The Harmony Collective has offered to mediate new negotiations. Even the Thrakari hunters are asking questions about their own orphan policies." Zexthari turned away from the viewport to face his subordinate. "You have doubts about our mission." It was not a question. Kraketh had served under Zexthari for 20 years, and the war chieftain could read his moods like text on a screen. "I have watched the human families, sir," Kraketh said carefully. "I have seen how they interact with their adopted cubs. The emotional bonds appear to be genuine." "Emotional bonds are not the same as genetic bonds," Zexthari replied, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. "Are they not?" Kraketh asked. The human Troy Adams was willing to die for a Thrilaxian cub. How is this different from a Vorthak parent defending their genetic offspring? Zexthari had been asking himself the same question for 3 days. Everything in his culture told him that blood bonds were superior to chosen bonds. But he had watched that human farmer fight with a devotion that matched any Vorthak warrior protecting their young. Sir, Kraketh continued, I request permission to speak with the Thrilaxian cub. I want to understand how she views her relationship with the human. Zexthari was surprised by the request, but he nodded. Very well, but you will observe proper protocols. An hour later, a small transport shuttle brought Zixia Adams up to the Vorthak flagship. She was accompanied by Dr. Marcus Johnson and 2 human guards, though everyone knew the guards would be useless if the Vorthak decided to harm them. Zixia looked very small and young as she stood in the massive conference room aboard the Eternal, Fang. Her crystalline skin had turned a pale silver color that Dr. Johnson recognized as the Thrilaxian expression of nervousness. But she stood straight and looked directly at War Chieftain Zexthari without flinching. You are Zixia Adams, Zexthari said in perfect Thrilaxian. His species was known for their linguistic abilities. Yes, sir, Zixia replied in the same language. Thank you for letting my Papa Troy prove himself in your arena. Zexthari studied the young Thrilaxian carefully. She was well grown for her age, with healthy crystalline formations and clear, intelligent eyes. There was nothing about her that suggested she had been harmed by being raised by humans. Tell me about your life with the humans, he commanded. Zixia took a deep breath. Papa Troy found me when I was 9 years old. I was very sad and scared because my birth parents had died in an accident. I did not speak any human languages, and I did not understand human customs. She paused, her skin flickering with different colors as she remembered. Papa Troy was very patient with me. He learned to speak Thrilaxian so he could talk to me. He studied our food requirements and our cultural traditions. He wanted to make sure I could grow up knowing who I was. But you live as a human now, Sub-Commander Kraketh observed. No, sir, Zixia said firmly. I live as myself. Papa Troy never tried to make me human. He helped me stay Thrilaxian while also learning to live in a human world. Zexthari leaned forward in his chair. What is the difference between Troy Adams and a Thrilaxian parent? Zixia thought about this question for a long moment. A Thrilaxian parent would love me because I share their genes. Papa Troy loves me because he chooses to every day. He has to work harder at being my father because it does not come naturally to him. Does this make him weaker? Zexthari asked. No, sir. It makes him stronger. Anyone can love someone who looks like them and thinks like them. It takes real strength to love someone completely different from yourself. Dr. Johnson watched the exchange with fascination. He had expected the Vorthak to interrogate Zixia aggressively, but instead they seemed genuinely curious about her perspective. Do you consider yourself to be human? Kraketh asked. Zixia's skin shifted to a warm golden color that indicated amusement. I am Thrilaxian by birth and human by choice. Papa Troy taught me that family is not about what species you are. It is about who you choose to stand with when things get difficult. Zexthari stood up and walked around the table to stand directly in front of Zixia. Even sitting down, he towered over her. But she did not show any fear. Child, he said, switching to perfect human English, your adoptive father nearly died for you. Was his sacrifice worth it? He did not sacrifice anything, Zixia replied. He just did what any good father would do. He protected his daughter. But you are not his biological daughter. Zixia looked up at the massive Vorthak leader with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. Sir, with respect, that is the most stupid thing I have ever heard. Dr. Johnson felt his heart stop. No one spoke to a Vorthak war chieftain like that, especially not a 12-year-old child. But Zexathari did not react with anger. Instead, he sat back down and stared at Zixia with something that might have been amazement. Explain, he commanded. Biology does not make a family, Zixia said simply. Love makes a family. Choice makes a family. Papa Troy chose me, and I chose him. We decide every day to be father and daughter. How is that weaker than just being born related? Zexathari was quiet. For a long time, around the conference table, his officers waited to see how their leader would respond to being called stupid by a human-raised alien child. Finally, he spoke. You speak of choice as if it is stronger than instinct. It is, Zixia said, without hesitation. Instinct just happens. Choice takes courage. That evening, Zexathari called a meeting of his senior staff. The conference room was filled with the most dangerous Vorthak warriors in the fleet, beings who had conquered worlds and destroyed enemies without mercy. I want opinions, Zexathari announced. What have we learned from observing the human families? The responses were mixed. Some officers maintained that the humans were corrupting alien children and weakening the galaxy. But others, led by Sub-Commander Kraketh, expressed doubts about their traditional beliefs. War Chieftain, said Commander Velthara, still bandaged, from her combat with Troy Adams. I have fought many enemies, but I have never faced someone who fought with the strength that humans showed. If chosen bonds can create that kind of devotion, perhaps we have underestimated their value. The child we interviewed today was healthy, intelligent, and proud of her heritage, Kraketh added. She has not been corrupted by human influence. If anything, she seems to have gained strength from having parents who chose her specifically. The debate continued for hours. Finally, Zexathari called for silence. I have led the Vorthak for 30 years, he said. In that time, I have never questioned our ancient laws about bloodlines and genetic purity, but I have seen something in the last few days that challenges everything I believed. He paused, looking around the room at his officers. I have seen love that transcends biology. I have seen strength that comes from choice rather than instinct. And I have seen that perhaps the humans have discovered something we missed in all our thousands of years of evolution. What are you saying, War Chieftain? One of his officers asked. Zexathari stood up, his massive form filling the room with authority. I am saying that maybe it is time for the Vorthak to evolve again. Maybe it is time to learn from the humans. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Some officers looked horrified, others looked thoughtful, and a few looked relieved. We will return. To Krathis Prime, Zexathari announced. We will present this matter to the High Council, and we will propose changes to our laws about orphaned cubs. As the meeting ended and officers filed out, Kraketh approached his commander. Sir, the other predator species will see this as weakness. Zexathari looked out at the human colony spinning below them. Perhaps, Sub-Commander, or perhaps they will see it as the greatest strength of all. The courage to admit when you are wrong, and the wisdom to learn from your enemies. For the first time since the crisis began, Zexathari felt like he was making the right choice. The humans had taught him something important about the nature of family and love. Now it was time to see if his own species was strong enough to learn from that lesson. 1 year later, Ambassador Carol Peterson stood before the Galactic Council once again. The same chamber that had condemned human adoption practices now buzzed with excited conversation as representatives from across the galaxy discussed the most sweeping social changes in recorded history. Carol looked very different from Senator Kate Williams, who had failed to convince the council a year ago. Where Kate had been desperate and pleading, Carol was confident and proud. She represented not just humanity now, but the new alliance of chosen bonds, over 80 species that had embraced interspecies adoption. The changes had started on the Vorthak homeworld of Krathus Prime. War Chieftain Zexathari had done something unprecedented in Vorthak history. He had convinced the High Council to completely rewrite their laws about orphaned children. The new Vorthak system was revolutionary. Instead of forcing orphaned cubs to survive wilderness trials alone, they created trials of commitment. Adults who wanted to adopt orphaned children, even children from other species, had to prove their dedication through challenges that tested emotional bonds rather than genetic compatibility. The first Vorthak adoption trial had shocked the galaxy. A Vorthak warrior named Kexavar had requested permission to adopt a young human boy whose parents had died in a transport accident. The boy, 8-year-old Danny Carter, had been living in a refugee center with no family to claim him. Kexavar had to prove his commitment by learning human culture, human language, and human child-rearing practices. He had to demonstrate that he could provide for the boy's physical and emotional needs. Most importantly, he had to show that he genuinely cared about Danny's well-being rather than just wanting to possess him. The trial had lasted 3 months. At the end, Danny himself was allowed to speak before the Vorthak High Council. "Kexavar is not my birth father," the boy had said in carefully practiced Vorthak. "But he learned my language so he could talk to me. He studied human food so he could cook for me. He bought me books about Earth so I would not forget where I came from. If that is not love, I do not know what is." The High Council had approved the adoption unanimously. Danny Carter became the first human child ever raised by Vorthak parents, and Kexavar became the first Vorthak to prove that chosen bonds could be just as strong as blood bonds. Now, a year later, the Vorthak Confederation had become the strongest, supporters of interspecies adoption rights in the galaxy. Their warrior culture adapted to protect chosen families with the same ferocity they once reserved for genetic bloodlines. "Honored delegates," Carol said, addressing the Galactic Council, "we are here today to formalize the Interspecies Family Accords. These agreements will establish the right of any sentient being to form family bonds across species lines, protected by galactic law." She gestured to the viewing screen which showed images from across the galaxy, Vorthak families with adopted human children, human families with adopted alien children, Thrakari hunters raising orphaned Aquari younglings, Draconi warriors teaching young Corvin cubs to fly. "The old way said that biology determines family," Carol continued. "The new way says that love determines family. And love, as we have learned, is the strongest force in the universe." In the gallery above the council floor, special guests watched the proceedings. Troy Adams sat with his adopted daughter Zexia, both of them wearing formal clothes for the historic occasion. Troy's scars from the combat trial had healed, but they served as permanent reminders of what a parent would do for their child. Next to them sat war chieftain Zexathari with his own adopted human son, 10-year-old Michael Torres. The boy had lost his family in a mining accident 6 months ago, and Zexathari had personally requested permission to adopt him. The sight of the massive Vorthak warrior gently helping a small human boy read his tablet computer had become one of the most famous images in the galaxy. "Papa Zex," Michael whispered. "Is this the day that makes it official?" "Yes, little warrior," Zexathari replied in perfect English. "Today the galaxy recognizes that we are truly father and son." The council vote was unlike anything in galactic history. Species that had been enemies for centuries found themselves united in support of the new family rights. The Thrakari, once devoted to genetic purity, voted in favor after seeing how adopted children could strengthen their hunting packs. The Draconi Empire, previously obsessed with bloodline superiority, supported the Accords after discovering that chosen bonds could create loyalty stronger than genetic programming. When the final votes were counted, the result was overwhelming. 194 species in favor, 8 against, 12 abstaining. Speaker Yorvak announced the result with obvious emotion in his ancient voice. The interspecies family accords are hereby adopted as galactic law. All member species recognize the right to form families through choice, love, and commitment, regardless of